Hi, guys. Hi, guys.
Hi.
We're all here.
I'm so excited.
That was a lot of pressure on you having to get it all set up. I was like,
I'd never done it before, so I was like clicking over your names. I didn't realize it was on the participant list and not directly from your icons. You know,
that makes sense.
Could you set me as a co-host, Jen? Did you figure that out? You just have to press the ... next to my name on the participant list.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah, that's great.
Okay, cool.
Thanks, Mishti.
And I got DK set as co-host.
Emily's here. Let's bring her
up.
I did. I invited her. Here, let me bring her up. Invite pending. I'm glad we all signed on before to figure this out.
Yes, that was on purpose.
Okay, so invite pending on Emily and invite pending on DK.
Okay.
So I think we're set. I'm so excited about this.
I know, me too. Hi, Emily.
I'm so excited.
Emily, my Pilates teacher, knows you and your sister, or like knows of you guys, because she used to make figure skating costumes. The most random small world.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, Emily, somebody that's coming tonight also said they know you from high school.
Oh, what?
Your sister's
way back.
Let me see. It still says invite pending for Emily. Do you see the same thing I see, Mishti?
For Emily?
Yeah.
I see her up on stage.
Emily's on stage.
There she is.
Oh, there, okay.
In spotlight.
Wait.
These two.
I don't see Emily on stage.
But
do you guys?
It's not showing on yours? Yeah, she's right next to me. I'm taking a picture. Smile.
Yeah, you can try refreshing.
It's like,
Aw.
that's a figure skater in you. You're like,
Mishti, I should try refreshing.
Yeah, try refreshing. I see everyone on stage, like Emily and Shannon spotlighted, so
yeah,
like Emily and Shannon spotlighted, so
yeah. The people want more Emily. Yes.
Is anyone else not able to see Emily? Because I am.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, amazing. Okay, this all works for me now.
I see Liz. Fagan Gottlieb. Hi. Like the way high school way back on my end too. I love this.
Shannon, we have a surprise. Liz is going to intro.
It's amazing.
Liz is going to share a story, a memory.
Oh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, I love this.
And family is here, so that's also another lovely surprise. Emily has 6 kids, and her mom is here too.
Oh, how sweet! I need to send this to my mom. She's probably mad.
Sorry?
Oh, I said I need to send this to my mom too. That's a great idea.
You know, if you do, we're just going to invite her up and have her tell an embarrassing story.
Maybe not.
Emily's mom tells great stories, though. We love it.
That's awesome.
Okay, should we get started? How many people are here? Let me check. Sweet. It looks like there's a good number of people here. Mishti, are the green dots the people who are here?
yeah, the green dots are the people who are online right now.
Okay, maybe we should wait a couple minutes.
And then everyone else is people who RSVP'd, so if they're not green, then I guess they're not online yet.
Got it. I see my brother here.
Yay for family!
I know, totally. Renko events are like friends and family.
Just super cool friends and family. I love this.
Oh, you know. I also see my neighbor, Laura. Friends, family, neighbors.
Friends, family, neighbors. Perfect.
And I hear your former neighbor is going to come, Shannon. Dora?
Yeah. My former, like, both Duke grads, and then we ended up buying condos a couple doors down from each other near Dolores Park. And we've since moved. I'm in a different part of the city, and she lives somewhere else, but it's a very small little world.
Totally. She told me about you a while ago when I met with her about Renaissance Collective, and she was like, she didn't realize you were a professional runner. She saw that you were going for a run. She's like, "Oh, I also run. You run?" and I realized she really runs. It's a great neighbor intro.
You'll really run.
Really runs. All right, should we get started? What do you guys think? Okay, because I know that everyone is excited to ask you guys questions, so I want to get started so we leave as much time for that as possible. For those in the audience who don't know me, I'm Jen, and I organize the Renaissance Collective. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this really special evening with 2 Olympians. Emily and Shannon are 2 of the most impressive women I know. Not only are they like superhuman athletes, they're smart, curious problem solvers, and great communicators. I'm really excited that we have this amazing opportunity to ask them questions and to hear their stories tonight. So this event is brought to you by Renaissance Collective, which is a community that builds bridges for smart generalists in tech. I like to say that we're 1 part social club and 1 part professional network. And we take generalists to mean people who have an extraordinary range of interests and talents, and our featured guests tonight are no exception. I just want you guys to remember that we want this event to be really participatory. So please post your questions or stories in chat. I know that Emily's mom and sisters are in the audience and they have some really delightful stories. So please just say, I want to share a story. And if you post in chat, we will invite you up to stage to ask your question. The structure of this event will be a Q&A, so it's meant to be a conversation between Emily, Shannon, Ally, and all of you. Ally will be kicking us off with a few questions tonight. And for those of you who don't know Ally, she's also in Renaissance Collective and is a very talented runner. I know we have lots of those here tonight with some of my Impala teammates and Ally's Princeton cross-country teammates. When Ally's not racing on the trails, she's a freelance journalist writing about public education and other topics in the East Bay. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Emily, who joined Renco as one of our founding members. Emily is an incredibly accomplished figure skater. She earned a silver medal at the U.S. Championships and finished 7th in the 2006 Olympics. I met Emily through her husband, Amit, and when Amit introduced us, he was like, Emily is a culture maker. You need her in the community. And at first, I didn't realize what that meant or how perfect that description actually is for Emily. But I found out that what it means is that Emily models leadership and how she brings people together. Like when she took us all on a field trip to go ice skating, or when she recently hosted a talent show last month. Fun story about that talent show. She organized a way for all the audience members to judge the performances. And once we'd announced the winners, she was like, wait, what about the prizes? We can't have a talent show without prizes. And then since we didn't have any prizes, she offered to buy everyone Amazon gift cards, like just for the winners, which pretty much exemplifies how generous Emily is in everything she does and also what she values about competition. But anyhow, Shannon recently joined Renco. We are so lucky to have her here. We met Shannon through my brother, who's also here tonight. If you're a competitive runner, though, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard of Shannon. So I definitely knew of her before meeting her. She's one of the most decorated American track athletes of all time, and she's competed in the Olympics 3 times, won 2 bronze medals, and held various American records in the 1500, 2-mile, and 5K. And I would love to turn it over to Liz, my Impala teammate, who will share a story about Shannon. Liz, let's get you up on stage. Oh man, this might take we should have managed this stage bit. I think Liz is getting ready and coming up.
Hi, Liz.
Yes, Liz.
Oh, hi.
Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. I've known Shannon Rowbury since she was in high school, and it was my identical twin sister, Mary Fagan Churchill, who was working at Sacred Heart Cathedral Prep as a teacher and as a coach. And she helped coach the cross country and track and field team with Andy Chan during Shannon Rowbury's career. So during that time, I was able to see Shannon compete at the California State Meet. And over the years, I've watched her at Stanford and even the Paris Diamond League with my daughter when she was 1 year old. But I remember the first California State track meet. It was that I went to with Shannon. I tagged along with my twin sister, and Mary told me her job was to keep Shannon distracted and in the zone. And Shannon needed to have a turkey sandwich, her pre-race meal, and she had to go to the movies and keep it light. And so we did that. And then it was only a few hours later, Shannon went on to win her first California State meet in the 800 meters. And what always stood out to me over the years, because I'm also a teacher and a coach, was how Shannon approached everything, whether it was school, training her arts and her life with precision and diligence. And over the years, I've been so lucky to introduce her to my athletes and my students. And I love raving not only about Shannon's athletic prowess, but also her academic and artistic and activism achievements. So I'm really excited that we get to share this evening with Shannon, and it's great to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I didn't know I would get to see you today. I love connection and this running community and just the sports community in general. Such a feeling of family and, to have relationships that go back to high school and to have been able to grow and evolve and watch your friends succeed at all kinds of things, but have this foundation where you really see people's core in their sports endeavors. I think it's just such a blessing and so good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz, for that really wonderful intro. One thing that really stood out to me from that is this idea that Shannon and Emily, I know as well from our conversations together, like bring their athlete mindset not only to their athletics, but to so many other parts of their lives. And I'm really excited to talk about that with you guys. I'm honored and a little intimidated to be joining you both tonight for this conversation about what being an athlete has meant to you. Both Shannon and Emily are as impressive on the track and on the ice as they are in the workplace. Shannon, who's still a professional Nike athlete, is also the director of external sales at Parity, which is a sport tech platform and where she focuses on finding partners who recognize the value of female athlete voice. And then Emily has worked at Deloitte and Google and now works at Facebook on the sports partnership team. So I'm really stoked to learn from both Shannon and Emily, not only as athletes, but as superstars in the workplace and elsewhere too. So I hope that this conversation, I'm going to launch us off with a couple of questions, but please feel free to send questions in the chat. We want this to be a conversation and Q&A with everybody here, and we'll bring you up on stage to talk in just a bit. So the thing that I wanted to start off with was a question that we started talking about a couple of days ago, Shannon and Emily, which is like, what does it mean to you to be an athlete? I think that's something a lot of people have preconceived notions of, and also think it only applies to that sport. So I'm really curious to hear what you think on what the athlete identity means to you and looks like. Either one of you can start.
Shannon, you want to kick us off? All right, yeah, I can start. I mean, I think for me, I don't think being an athlete means just one thing. I mean, I think being an athlete, I was an athlete and still think of myself as an athlete because I learned so much being an athlete, and not just because I made it to the Olympics, but I think just being an athlete in general, you learn so many different things that then translate off the ice or off the court or off the track that I still think about or lean on or use today. Not just, hard work and, setting goals, but also things around like overcoming obstacles. And, what do you do with failure? You're not going to win every competition or every event. And so, you kind of learn a lot of these things being an athlete. And so to me, I think that's a lot of what being an athlete means. Shannon, interested to hear your thoughts. Yeah, agreed. I think, as we were preparing for this, one of the things that Emily and I were talking about is this idea that, for me, 14 years, I've been sponsored by Nike as a professional athlete. And I often still get asked people, what's my full-time job or what do I do for my day job? Without the understanding that, training doesn't start just, in the few months leading up to the Olympics, that this is and has been my full-time job until very recently, until I started working part-time at this startup. And I think some of the other misconceptions about athletes, this idea of, the dumb jock in high school that has everything handled for them. And I can only speak from my experience in track and field. But, I have to be very good at time management, and I have to be a self-starter, and I have to, I train in San Francisco remotely. My coach lives in Portland. And so I have to be able to manage a complicated schedule, especially now as a mother. And, on top of all of that, the learning how to deal with pressure. So as I do external sales, for example, preparing for a sales pitch for me is the same sort of process of preparing for a competition and making sure I have all the things that I need in place so that I can be fully focused in the moment. Or if I have a successful meeting and I get a new client, that same sort of thrill of success that you would have from winning a competition. And so, while athlete has always been seen in this one way, and we think of them on the field of play, so many of those innate traits that you develop in athletics are really translatable, and hence why we're here.
Shannon, can you give us just a little snippet of like what that crazy schedule looks like for you? Because it blew me away.
Let's see. So I took on this. So as we all know, 2020 was crazy. And for me as an athlete, that meant, even though my Nike contract ended in December of 2020, I had to figure out, did I want to extend my running career another 6 to 12 months, which, when I was 23 would have been a lot less things to consider. But at 36 with a husband and a kid and a mortgage, and a contract that had ended, it took a lot more consideration. So, I decided to move forward and see this running cycle through till the end. And it's a lot of multitasking. I usually, get up around 7 and start doing a little bit of work, try to get this old body of mine moving with a cup of coffee and some, picking up the kid. And then usually trying to get in my runs at some point before 1 p.m. before I'm too tired, taking sales calls. Sometimes if it's a work call, maybe cross training or doing some other stuff while I take it. And, I think that's the nature of multitasking women and moms, is just trying to find places to fit in the things that, are the non-negotiables, and try to find joy in the process. And the one biggest thing I take ever since that I was a kid, that my mom told me, which was, pursue the things you love, and if you do, success will find you. And when you're going to have a busy schedule, if you have to fit a lot in, at least if you love the stuff that you're doing, it doesn't feel so bad.
I can picture like the mom working and taking care of the kids simultaneously, but I don't know if I can picture the mom working, riding the bike, and taking care of the kid at the same time.
Depends on how old the kid is. When they're in the little like rocky, car seat thing and they can't move, you can exercise. When they understand not to get too close, you can exercise. And in between, you find parents or babysitters so that all the fingers.
One thing that we also talked about last time, that you both have mentioned a little bit, is like, I'm really curious, what are some of those stories that have shaped what being an athlete means for you? I know for you, Emily, like failure is a big part of how you have come to see yourself as an athlete. That sounded odd, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's that overcoming of like, it's not always, there's not always a straight line, and it's not always easy. My mom would say, if it were easy, everyone would do it. And that was something that she would say a lot, because we were trying to do difficult things and it wasn't always easy. But I think, going back to that though, there is one story where in 2002, I was competing, at the nationals at the junior level, and got last place. So I was excited I qualified, but dead last. And the next month, my sister, competing at the senior level, won the Olympics. And that for me was a point where I, saw her train and saw her go through this journey and thought, oh, I want to do that. I can do that. And so the next year qualified again for nationals, at the junior level again, and got second to last place. And I remember my parents were standing outside the arena waiting for me, and I run out the arena, and I think that they were thinking, oh, she just got second to last place. Unclear what's going to happen. And I ran out thinking, I didn't get last place. And so just had this idea of I did something better. I didn't get last. And I think it was that mentality that really led me from getting last place and then 4 years later being on the Olympic team. And a lot of stuff happened in that 4 years, but But, was always kind of thinking about, all right, how can I, maybe something didn't go as planned, but let's, figure out how I can then use this to then move towards that goal.
Mm. And how has that mindset, like how have you seen that come up in the rest of your life kind of since that time of dealing with failure and being able to overcome it instead of just literally falling down and actually being able to pick yourself back up?
Yes, in skating, you literally fall down and have to get up and smile and pretend like it didn't happen and try to finish the rest of your program like the best you can. And sometimes you fall and still can do well. And so I think that it's something that you learn though, because it could easily just derail the whole program. But I think, taking that off the ice, nothing ever, you can have a plan, but most times it's not going to go to plan, or you're not going to get everything you try to do, or you're not going to succeed in everything you're trying. And so I think it's kind of helped me think through of different times when something wasn't going exactly to plan. It's okay, well, I can learn from this. What can I do next, or how can I take this and do something to still stay on that track. So it is a lot of like, how can I transferring those skills that I learned on the ice, like physically falling, to then theoretically falling. Yeah, it's like learning through failure. I think as much as I wish I could learn through, as much as I wish that life could be smooth sailing, this idea of, at least in my own career, and it sounds like, as Emily said, for her as well, some of my greatest successes have come after what felt like my biggest failures, like in college, my senior cross country season, we were favored to win, and I fell apart in the race, and shortly afterwards had a stress fracture that ended my collegiate career early, which, at 22, at 23 felt like the end of the world. But you focus on the process, just like Emily was saying, it's this process mindset. It's focusing on the day-to-day and how you can execute and be a little bit better and a little bit better, and slowly climb that mountain. And for me, in that scenario, a year later, I found myself winning the Olympic trials and making my first Olympic team. And, it's the stuff in between that gets you to that success. Most people see, the failures, or they see the successes. But for me, it was when I found out I had that stress fracture, okay, I'm going to move home. I'm going to find a good rehab team, chiropractor, massage therapist. I'm going to figure out what caused the injury in the first place. Like, not just fixing the problem that I'm seeing, not putting a Band-Aid on it, but getting to the root of the problem so that I could hopefully minimize the risk of it coming back again. This metaphor, this whole story is completely translatable to anything in life. When you have something that's not working, when you have a failure that's really disappointing, it's giving yourself the space to pause and reflect and figure out, why did this happen? And are there things that I can do differently? Are there things that I can change so that it doesn't happen again, or that it's less likely to happen again in the future? And I think that, those lessons that Emily and I have shared are ones that are so kind of visceral, but it's so translatable to life. And
I think I already am getting a sense for the answer to this question then, but I think it's a good segue. I think people, especially for extremely successful athletes, will wonder, how much is this just inherent talent as opposed to the work ethic or some of these hard learned lessons along the way? Like, what's your guys' perspective on that? As little kids, do you have evidence that kind of tracks for one argument or the other in terms of the nature versus nurture debate?
I can go. I watched the Olympics, and I was I was a dancer as a kid. So I started Irish dancing at the age of 5. I had no interest in sports because I never saw anyone that looked like me on the TV, except for at the Olympics. You know, most of the year, for 350 days out of, I should say maybe 14 days out of 4 years, there was the Olympics, and I could see figure skating and gymnastics, or I guess it was every 2 years. Anyway, I could see these women performing at the highest level at the Olympics. And that was the one time as a kid that I could think, wow, maybe that's something that I could do. But the rest of the time, sports just didn't interest me. And as I grew older, I started running in high school because my friends were doing it, and I found that I had some talent. But all I wanted to do was be the best at the team. And then once I was good enough there, best in the league, then the section, then the state, and then the nation, and then the same process in high school and the same process as a pro. So I think for me, it's always been this idea of be the best at the level you're at. And if you do that, and if you keep doing that, then before you know it, you'll look back and be floored by how far you've come. I think it does take talent, clearly. There's certain things that I never would have been super successful at. And so, a lot of it for me was being open and willing to kind of test different areas and see where I seem to have a natural inclination and natural ability. And then it was putting in the hard work day after day, surrounding myself by good people who could guide me, because I didn't know anything about running to start, but I had good coaches, I had good support. And then, working diligently, long time to get there.
Emily, do you see it the same way as Shannon?
Yeah, I think talent can take you to a certain point, but I really think it is that hard work, and it's that it's that hard work that will take you to really excel and be at the top.
On the note of what allows you to excel, I think we want to bring up Matt, who asked a really insightful question in the chat. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, I'm loving this from both of you, by the way. But my question was about kind of picking yourself up and, getting back at it after a moment of reflection and thinking about the competitive environment that you were in, where not everyone is necessarily incentivized to root for you. So I'd love to think that there's this, culture in athletics where people are just, trying to bring each other up to, dust it off and get back into it, but then also a conflict of, motive. So I'd just love to hear about the culture you grew up in and kind of what you live in and how that shapes you.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I think for me, that community was and is really important. Like Jen mentioned in the beginning, my mom is on this call and then watching this. My sisters are watching this. I worked with the same coach since I started skating, pretty much, and so having that community and that supportive community throughout my career was. It was really the reason. It was probably the driving reason why I, was able to then excel the way that I could. I'm sure, Shannon, you probably have a similar experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, it was really interesting. I struggled a lot when I transitioned to professional running in my 20s, especially as there came to be more message boards and forums and social spheres of commentary and trolling. At its foundation, I have a very supportive family. My husband was a professional athlete himself, Mexican national record holder, very much gets behind what I do and has never made me feel like I was missing out when I would be gone for competitions, helped me understand what an incredible opportunity it was, which wasn't always the case. And, my friend network wasn't the biggest because I traveled a lot or because, success, especially what I've observed a lot of times within women's communities, it can be tough to see success as something that's non-threatening. And so working through, finding these supportive environments where we're lifting each other up collectively. When I've had tough times, when I've been in the center of some media storm, it's really painful. And everybody has an opinion and they forget that you're a person. But you also really see who your people are. And as much as possible, I try to come back to, is there any kernel of truth? Is there any wisdom in this conversation that I can learn from and grow from? And then beyond that, I have to accept that the price of greatness is opinions and attention, and but also the opportunity to inspire and really focusing on those things that I can control and those things that, what am I opting into and focusing on that.
One question. Oh, sorry. Matt, did you have any follow-ups that you wanted to ask to that? I love both of those responses.
No, I didn't. Just really appreciate the answer. Thanks.
I think one follow-up for me that comes up is what Mishti asked down below is like, is there anything that you have tweaked over time in terms of either the people that you surround yourself with or what supports you build in for yourself for mental health or physical conditioning or whatever it is? Like, how have you changed how you support yourself and make sure that that success happens? And that can be in athletics or not.
I can go. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember at the beginning of my professional career. So I remember at the beginning of my professional career. So I signed with Nike. I was 22 or 23 or something. And my first couple years I had moved back to San Francisco. I had, no boyfriend, no mortgage. Like all I was doing was running. I was rehabbing my injury. And then I had come into my own in running, and it was like my focus. And, but there was no balance. And I remember finding at, very inopportune times, I would just crash mentally. I just couldn't keep that intensity all the time. And I remember having this kind of wake up call for myself where I realized that if I wanted to do this career for 10 years, that I would need to find a way to create that balance. And, thinking of it like a pendulum where, if you want to swing high one direction, you also have to swing the other to, really let yourself recover. And so, this keyword of balance, which seems so simple, but really applies in so many levels. It's the balance of the day to day. When my daughter comes home and says, closes my laptop and says no more work, taking that as a sign that I need to stop the work and I need to connect with what matters most. But it's also, in planning my year, in the running world, competition is mostly during the summer. So that's the most intense period, which means for me, the fall is my opportunity to take a vacation or, stay up late or maybe have some days where I don't have to run. And then, the intensity ramps up gradually throughout the year so that ideally, physically and mentally, I'm ready when it matters most. I think that's given me the longevity in sports that I've had. But it's tough. It's tough to find that balance. But when you can carve out those spaces where you can say, this is for me, or, this is my time to recover, or I need to focus for this period of time, this compartmentalism, which I think is pretty common amongst athletes, like this ability to focus on that because it will end and that you'll have the next thing coming, and be fully present in that moment.
I think Emily, go ahead.
No. Let's bring up Liz for her question.
Yeah, I think a great transition from this.
Hi, thanks. I also am loving the conversation, and something I'm really curious about. I'm also a lifelong athlete, not at quite the level, and you are, but I always joke to the athletes that I coach that I'm uncoachable at this point because I'm so old and I've done it all, and I'm really used to the things that I like. So I'll do tempos all day long. And I'm curious, I know I could use a coach, and I'm curious, based on your longevity, how has that role of a coach changed? And is it more collaborative? How do you manage that? Because you know so much now, right? So I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so I was fortunate that my first coaches, my high school and college coach, were really great people. Liz, you mentioned Andy Chan, and I had Kevin Germain at Duke. They laid the foundation for a healthy mindset for sport. Unfortunately, in the professional running world, or not just professional world in general, there aren't always great coaches. And some of the coaches that I have had since, not my current one, but some of the ones in between were, as an adult looking back, not environments I'd want my daughter to be a part of. I'm hopeful that will evolve and change, and hopefully that there's, I myself and many others are leading efforts to, improve that. But I think that now, as a 36-year-old, 14 years as a pro, I do have a lot of it. I do intuitively know a lot of things. At the same time, it's so important to have a sounding board and to have someone who will take your feedback, who respects you, and whom you respect, so that you can share where you're coming from, and then they can truthfully share where they're coming from as well, and you ultimately come to a decision. I like taking the the responsibility off my own shoulders of knowing that, like, I can kind of, just throw all my thoughts at my coach and he can process and come back to me with what he recommends, knowing that, if I give pushback, he will consider it. So I think it's like any good relationship, just like in your own life partner, that it's some version of a life partner, some version of a good friendship, where it's a person who really kind of helps you cut through the confusion and really see what it is that's best for you.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Like for me, thinking about my in skating, when I first starting and going through the ranks, it was a lot more coaching of technique and how to do a jump and how to do a spin. And it's actually interesting. The coach that I had, Bonnie, I worked with her. I think I started when I was 5 or 6 working with her, maybe even earlier. And I worked with her throughout my whole career. And there were different points in my career where there was something where it just wasn't working. So there's an element called a double axel. You take off forward, rotate 2.5 revolutions in the air and land backwards. And I just could not get this jump. I just couldn't do it. And it was years of practice. And I think she saw, well, how can I support Emily in doing this jump? And she found a couple different coaches, which is not like usually a normal experience where one coach is saying, oh, go take from another coach. But she was kind of bringing in other coaches for me to learn from. And eventually I completed this double axel after 4 years, which is a very long time. And then, that kind of led the way to my triples. And like, that was a big turning point for me in my career. And, Bonnie, I think, saw, and now as I'm seeing that there are different, I think you need different things as you're, going through your athletics career. And at some point it then turned into, well, not as much technique, but how can someone motivate me to run through these programs and to do the training? And I think that actually also translates out of the ring too, or off the ice and in a professional environment. Thinking about reaching out to different people for advice or mentorship, you have a couple different people you might reach out to for different reasons or different things or different questions. And so it is interesting to think about like the evolving role of a coach depending on kind of what stage you're in.
Thanks for such a great question, Liz.
Thank you.
Something, Shannon, that you mentioned when you were talking was that there were some aspects of the environment that you wish had been different for you, and that, say, if your daughter or someone else was growing up in that space, if you don't mind, what were some of those things? And Emily, for you, like, are there things like that too that you wish, the environment just would have been a bit different, or you figured out how to manage and wish you could kind of impart that to others?
Yeah, for me, I had a big kind of life moment when about a year into being a mother, and I was looking back at some of the relationships that I had with my early pro coaches, and just seeing it through the eyes of 2020 or whatever, 2019, whatever year it was, seeing it through the eyes of being a 36-year-old, seeing it through the eyes of a mother, and forgiving myself for putting up with something that I never thought I would have put up with. It's like being in a bad relationship and you come out of it and you're like, what was I thinking? But at the time, for me in my early stages as a pro, it was a different time. It was 2007, 2008. There wasn't this conversation about this celebration of diversity, of equity, and this push to try to find more of it. And so I think a lot of it for me was, like I said, forgiving myself for spending years in coaching environments that weren't the most healthy. It was the celebration of the fact that we are at a different time where we can advocate for things that should be. As a pregnant athlete, it was really challenging. There weren't any maternity policies or protections for me. And so, I risked, as a professional runner, my health insurance comes through my performance in races. And so if I'm pregnant, I'm not performing, which means I could lose my health insurance. And, I've had a long career in sports because my husband was willing to, let me pursue my career dreams and but it meant that his career wasn't as far advanced as it might otherwise have been. So the responsibility of supporting the family was on my shoulders. And so, as I dealt with a lot of these challenges, really advocating to change policies where I could and affect change where I saw it needed to be affected. And so in 2018, I was able to help pass a maternity policy that extended healthcare for pregnant athletes for, I think it was 18 months after delivery, which is huge because, we want our athletes to be able to. I knew I wanted to be a mom long before I ever wanted to be a professional athlete. And the choice was, if the choice had to be one or the other, then I probably wouldn't have tried to come back to sport. And to be honest, it's been tough, but shouldn't that be an option that, is given to me? And so, things like that, I think I love the quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but this idea of we stand on the shoulder of giants. I am here because of the work of the people before me and who created opportunities that I could be a professional athlete. I think that Title IX was passed in 1987 or something, and I was born in 1984. I went to Duke on a full athletic scholarship, and so I see my obligation to create a better future in sport for the men and women that come along in the future, and so it's just having your eyes wide open and being willing to, as I said, make change where.
What a powerful and vulnerable answer, Shannon. Thank you for that. I learned so much from that. Emily, if you want to add on, feel free. We're going to also bring Amit up to ask a follow-up to this.
Yeah, let's have Amit ask a follow-up first.
Yeah.
Hey, can you hear me? I loved everything you said, and something I've been thinking a lot about, especially like as some more has been in the news recently about athletes and the Olympics. I've been kind of feeling a little bit helpless and interested as we get more visibility into those environments that you're describing. Are there things that we can do as fans who aren't tuning into this every day, maybe as frequently as every few years, to push for changes in those spaces that maybe as athletes you see every day, but we don't see as often, that you'd like to see us do more of?
For sure, I think one of the biggest things within women's sports, because that's really where most of my advocacy has been, there's this statistic that I share in my external sales role at Parity, I'm trying to create more sponsorship opportunities for women. So the stat that I share, which is just mind-blowing, is that of the around $66 billion that's spent yearly on global sports sponsorship, of that 0.4% goes to women. So 99.6% is going to the men, 0.4% to women's sports. Wow. And if you take out Naomi Osaka and Serena Williams, it's even less, which, is, I knew that there was imbalance in my own career. I've experienced it firsthand. And this is in a sport like track and field where we have equal TV time, where we have, equal prize purses in posted amounts, but contract differentials were astronomical. And within there's women's sports isn't getting, I think it gets, I forget the stat, but it's like 4% or something of TV time. And so of course you're not going to get sponsorship dollars if you don't get TV time. And if you're not going to get TV time if there's nobody that wants to buy the ads. And so it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, recognizing the value of these athletes from a variety of sports, recognizing the value of the female athlete voice, and brands realizing that, if they want to be just purely skeptical when you're thinking about the consumer spend, that around 70 to 80% of purchasing power is within the hands of women. So shouldn't we be telling their stories and letting them speak about what matters to them? So I think, first and foremost, it's tuning in, it's supporting the athletes that you love, whoever they are, wherever they're from. I want the best to rise up. My advocacy is in women's sports, but I want every athlete of every background to succeed where they deserve to. So.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, it's been exciting to see more professional women's sports opportunities start to come up. Like there's a new league, Athletes Unlimited, where they have professional volleyball season that just started. And so seeing more of these opportunities is huge. And I think, like Shannon said, it's just hopefully continuing to increase the visibility and the opportunity for women in sports.
Thanks.
So next we're going to bring up Kate, and she has a question that'll be a smooth transition to how the next kind of chapter of our conversation, which is going to be about how athletics has transferred into work. So thanks, Kate.
Hi, both. Thank you so much for the sharing. Super, super insightful. So my question's around, because of how great you both are at the sport, I bet that has been, like, for a long time, a significant part of your personality or identity. And when you transition to the corporate world, I'm guessing there could be feeling like a very sharp transition, or almost feel like a loss. I wonder how that's like for you and how hard it is.
It's a great question. For me, I think that there was definitely this change of, I am on this path on, I'm a figure skater. I'm, doing these competitions to get to this goal. And then all of a sudden it was, oh wait, I'm not a figure skater, or I'm not competing anymore. And oh wait, there are thousands, if not millions, of paths I could potentially go through and all these different pieces. And I think there was this shift of a lot of ambiguity in a way. And I think while I was in that space, there was also a feeling of, oh, well, am I starting over? Am I starting from nothing? Am I just, competed was one of the best in the world at figure skating, and now what's next? And I think looking back, a couple big things is, one, you're not starting over. That the skills that I think you learned from being an athlete, you can translate and transfer over to whatever is next. And I think it is being able to talk about how those skills transfer. And maybe it's hard on paper, but I think looking back, that was a big thing of, you worked, you had to work really hard to get to where you are, and that translates over. You performed in front of thousands, if not millions of people. That translates over to doing a presentation, doing this interview. So there are so many different pieces that you can try to think of, how do I tell my story now in a way that highlights these skills that I learned, that then I can translate over to whatever that thing is next. And it was definitely a big transition. But looking back, I think that was like one of the biggest things was, I'm not starting from zero, but I am starting something new. And how do I think about what that looks like, and what skills that I learned, and how can I translate that over? Shannon, I'm interested to hear your experience, because it is a little bit different of, you're still competing, but have kind of thought a little bit about those skills. And so interested to hear your perspective as well.
Yeah. And, shout out to Emily, me and the whole entire crowd who loves her, because one of the second person I met at Renko after Jen was Emily. I had connected with Jen about this, this transition to life, my next career after professional sports, and, asking Emily about her process of, navigating that transition, and how she found a place that really she felt fulfilled, and her journey. And, in 2016, after the Rio Olympics, was the first time I really started thinking, about what comes next. For me, I like to have, kind of 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, where do I see myself? I don't set that in stone, but it at least gives me some direction. And in 2016, I was trying to figure out, if the whole world of opportunity is this pie, what wedge do I want to, I had a wedge I wanted to explore, and I was trying to see if I could make the slice a little slimmer. And so I started doing a lot of informational interviews. I knew I wanted to work in sports technology because I love the ability to have an impact on such a grand scale. I love the intersection of kind of traditional and innovative, and, this idea of creating something for sports that was like Nest was for thermostats, taking something that had been overlooked, which much of sports for the longest time was done in the same way forever, and really taking technology to transform that and improve it. And, when I think about, the way that, kids in 10, 20 years will be training, if not sooner, it's, it's pretty mind-boggling. But it was also really tough for me because my success as an athlete meant that I could get meetings with CMOs and chairmans and CEOs and people at the highest level of some really incredible companies. But the vast majority of people that I met would then not quite understand what my success on the track really meant. Those skills that Emily was talking about, it was like, okay, well, I see that you have been in 3 Olympics, but like not understanding everything it took to accomplish that, and not having a resume with the traditional box ticking things. And so, yeah, the majority of people that I talked to were like, well, I have this internship program, or maybe you should go get your MBA. And, the frustration of, trying to translate for them all of the things that it takes to have had that success was really tough. And I've spent the last 4 years trying to fill in those gaps where they might be, or to create in my resume opportunities and experiences that made more sense. As Emily said, like, how do I pitch myself? How do I tell that story in a way that makes them feel confident enough to take a chance on me? And with the company I'm at now, fortunately, the je ne sais quoi that is professional athletics at the highest level, they understand. I didn't need to translate it for them. And I think that, most people you'll hear about more and more companies where they say, they only want to hire athletes. When you get an athlete, especially one who's succeeded at this Olympic level, like, that doesn't happen by chance. These opportunities are rare, and so, creating, translating that for them, giving them those opportunities, and then, you'll be very pleased with the results.
Are there any other things that stand out as like things that people like really get or really don't get about having been an athlete? Have you guys had experiences where you've been typecast either positively or negatively?
I would say it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation, and this idea of like, oh, you're an athlete, you've probably, either you're the dumb jock or you've been totally coddled. And while that might be the case for some of these very well-funded professional teams like the NFL or the NBA or the MLB or the MLS, like, that is not the case in most women's sports. So for us, it's really being a self-starter. It's really being able to manage a lot of variables. We're our own we're managing our own business, which is us.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we have a little bit of support going on, but I'm booking my travel, I'm booking my hotel, I'm doing my training, I'm coordinating with my coach, I'm coordinating all the other appointments that I have to do during each and every week to stay healthy, to keep training. It's this ability to multitask and manage a lot of things at once that, like I said at the beginning too, like, is the bread and butter of kind of being like, women are just really good at that, but then also understanding that, like, that's what made us successful as athletes.
Yeah, I think one thing to add is, I didn't think of training as a job, but in some ways, the amount of time, energy, effort, and all of these things that go into it, could be akin to a job. And so when I talk about my skating career in job settings, sometimes I even say I retired at 21 and started my next career. And putting it in those terms is actually interesting, because I think that is very relatable for for an employer, which it is a bit odd to say you retired at 21. But in some ways that my career, my figure skating career, that was my last competition. But Shannon, it was really interesting to hear your perspective as well on that.
Kate, thank you so much for that question. I think we're going to bring up Angela, who asked a question about like transitions and exploration that I'm really curious to hear what you all think about.
Hey, can you hear me? Awesome. So I think you actually started going into this a little bit, but my question was when you were making the transition from professional athlete, whether it's full-time or part-time into the corporate world, you had a chance to almost start over again, choose something that you wanted to do in your next phase of your life. I think Shannon, you started going into it a little bit, but I was curious, as you were thinking about what you wanted to do next, how did you go about deciding, exploring what to do next? Was there a part of you that wanted to maybe not do sports and do something completely different? Or was it like, hey, I want to stay with sports and just continue going down that route, but maybe doing different things? Just curious how you thought about that.
Yeah, for me, it's been kind of a mix. Like I knew I never wanted to be in just sports alone, but I also knew that my highest likelihood of leveling up and kind of having an entry into a position that was actually, motivating and like thrilling and fulfilling was by leveraging my experience as a professional athlete. I've learned through my time competing I have this understanding of the athlete community, of the athlete mindset of sports, of how it operates, that is just kind of intuitive, and finding ways to use that to make a difference. I think it's no surprise that both Emily and I are involved in sports in some way, in a unique, different way, and in this cool, cutting edge version of sports where sports meets technology. And that is really thrilling for me and really exciting for me. But for me, it was more about, okay, how do I, if I want to be in a leadership position in 5 or 10 years, if I want to be in a position to really make change on a global scale, how do I level up? How do I get into a position where I can show my talents and my abilities and really shine, and hopefully, continue to grow into a meaningful and powerful role, or whatever meaningful role I should say. For me, part of being in a startup is because that gives me the opportunity, whereas maybe a more structured business might, not be willing to take the risk. And I couldn't sort of like pivot as quickly, and I couldn't show my skills, and I couldn't figure out exactly what I wanted to do because I am still learning through doing. But it's come down to me of, okay, what is it that I'm doing on a daily basis that I love and want to do more of? And what is it that I would be really happy to not do as much in the future, knowing that we're always going to have to do stuff we don't love, but trying to just keep gravitating more towards the things that get me excited.
Yeah, I think to add to Shannon's experience, for me, I think one thing you said in your question, Angela, was exploring, and I think that was a really big piece. Being in skating for many years and competing for many years, I saw one very small piece of what I could be doing, and so it was a lot of what's out there, what opportunities are there, what does it mean to work in these different industries, and so it was a lot of exploring, a lot of coffee chats, or not even drinking coffee, but that's what I'm calling them, informal chats of what does it mean to work at this company or to do this type of job, whether it's a startup or whatever that may be. And in some ways, I think there's still a level of exploration of, there are roles that are interesting that didn't exist a year ago, and there are roles that are going to be interesting that are going to come in 5 years that maybe that's something that I might be doing. And so I think that there's always this kind of piece of exploring.
It's awesome to hear. Thanks for sharing.
I love how relatable this is. Like, it's such a different context from all of us who haven't transitioned from being a professional athlete, but at the same time, the lessons are really resonate with me, at least. We're going to bring up Becca for a question about corporate sponsorships, and then we'll be just out of time, but might have time for one more question. And I definitely support family shout outs and embarrassing stories. Please. We want to know. But for now, Becca, go ahead.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to delay the funny family stories too much, but yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, I know Shannon, you've been sponsored by Nike for a long time, and Emily, you may have had this experience as well. But it does seem like these big, huge athletic companies, have a lot of kind of influence and power on who they're highlighting, who's wearing their clothes, and then kind of where the money goes. And so, just kind of wondering. How you think about sponsorship or how you think about influencing sponsorship for the better, so that it can highlight athletes that should be highlighted, or can kind of funnel those resources in the direction that supports, women or other underrepresented athletes as well. Shannon, yeah, I think you have a lot more experience here, both probably with your professional life and personal experience. So, okay, I'll take a stab. The hard part with athletics is the older you get, the less value you seem to have, unless you're, this superstar that can really, has came in with a lot of money and can leverage that to do more. But generally, your biggest contract that you're going to get is your first one, and the longer you stick around, the more it probably goes down. You're lucky if you can keep it as it is, which probably meant you didn't get as big of one to start. So that's always been really tough for me. I'm most proud of my consistency and my longevity in the sport. Being ranked top 10 in the world in track and field for a decade is not an easy thing, but that is valued much less than, with a collegiate superstar just coming out. And so I think, a lot of the way that sponsorship dollars are spent is on that hype. And my hope for the future is that we can find ways to celebrate the longevity, the credibility, the wisdom, creating more sponsorship opportunities where we're telling the stories, and great stories come from experience. And so that's, in the work that I'm doing and in the things that I'm seeing more of, it's companies recognizing that there's these stories that aren't being told, and that and that once they are, there's, so many people that they resonate with, because, the whole point of sponsorship dollars is to inspire, to attract attention to your brand, to make people feel like that's, you see the athlete you admire wearing a certain brand logo, and then the kids want to go out and look just like that person. But if you can tell more of those stories and help people understand what a brand stands for, I think that's how you build loyalty from those customers, and that how you become a brand that really has sticking power. Yeah, makes sense. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the question, Becca. So I think that we're going to wrap up our event here at the top of the hour. Went by so quickly, and I'm so grateful to have learned so much from both of you. I think what's impressive to me is just how blown away I am by both of your achievements, and yet how insightful and relatable so much of what you've said is. So thank you both. We're going to bring Jen up for a little close out. Great. For us.
Thank you, Ally, for moderating and asking great questions. And Shannon, it was really interesting to hear some of your experience. And so many of the chats are just singing your praises, and Jen saying that the consistency is amazing. And thank you everyone for joining. Yeah, thank you.
I love this event. It is so inspiring to be around you amazing women. Emily, I just tried to bring your mom up.
She went, no,
it's too late, huh?
I do have two. I think there's a friend joined that I skated with that I've known since probably middle school age. Two of my sisters are on. My brother is on. So lots of family on.
And friends. So cute. I Love it. Guys, thank you so much. We are going to send out a feedback form tomorrow. If you attended, please take the 30 seconds to fill it out. It means a lot to our speakers to get your feedback. So look for that in your inbox. And if you enjoyed this event, you can join us for other events. Just sign up for our newsletter, which we send out maybe once every 2 weeks at renaissancecollective.co. Thank you so much, Shannon, Emily, and Ally, and I will see you later. All right. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.